Hey guys, it's Sean O'Connell, the managing director here at CinemaBlend, and like you, I was watching that Morbius trailer that dropped earlier this week with Jared Leto in the Spider-Man sort of spin-off Sony universe, and got to the very end of it, and my jaw dropped.
Michael Morbius. Got tired of doing the whole good guy thing, huh?
There was a shocking cameo at the end of that trailer, a huge tease for some exciting things to come, and so I figured we would jump onto YouTube and talk about it as fans of both Spider-Man and Marvel and all the things happening at Sony. Before we do that, do me a favor, go down, hit subscribe, and turn on your notifications, because we're going to be breaking down Morbius and Spider-Man and Marvel for years to come, and we want to make sure that every time we post a video, you guys come and watch it. Before we dive into all the details, listen, there are going to be spoilers for both Morbius and Spider-Man and Marvel and a lot of other topics, so if you landed on this video by accident and don't want to know anything about all that stuff, back out right now. So, who shows up at the end of the Morbius trailer?
What's up, Doc?
Michael Keaton, and because it's in a Sony Spider-Man movie, we are assuming that he's playing Adrian Toomes, his villain character from Spider-Man Homecoming. He is not specifically identified in the trailer as Adrian Toomes, but again, this is part of the Spider-Man universe that Sony is creating on their side. There are deliberate title cards in the Morbius trailer that say from the studio that brought you Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home, and Venom, and we do know that Sony is establishing this larger Spider-Man universe through movies like Venom, the upcoming Venom 2, which will have Carnage in it, and of course the Morbius movie that we're talking about here with this first trailer.
Why am I still here if not to fix this?
Okay, so maybe you're asking, who is Adrian Toomes? Well, in Spider-Man Homecoming, Michael Keaton played the updated version of the Vulture, a classic Spider-Man villain who's been around from the comics for decades, and he got a modern upgrade with a lot of technology that was inspired by Tony Stark, stolen from the Chitauri with alien tech that they left behind in the first Avengers movie, and used to take down Spider-Man. It was his very first fight against a traditional Spider-Man villain that Tom Holland was finally able to go up against as Spider-Man. We did not see Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture, show up in Spider-Man Far From Home, but this is one of the first times that Michael Keaton showing up here in a Sony film creates a bridge over to the MCU.
At what cost?
We know that Marvel and Disney and Sony have worked out a deal that they can share Tom Holland because Sony has the rights to Spider-Man, and they can put him in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But so far, Tom Holland has not been able to go back over to the other side and appear in any of the Sony Spider-Man movies. Really, that's just Venom, and it kind of makes sense, I guess, because Venom took place in San Francisco, so to have the New York-based Peter Parker show up and participate in that story with Eddie Brock might not have made a whole ton of sense. Morbius is definitely set in New York City, though, and there is a reference to Spider-Man in the background of one of the shots, so we know the Spider-Man is part of that world, and they can do that without having Tom Holland show up because that's a contractual nightmare. What this implies, though, is that other characters that were established in that Spider-Man Marvel universe, aka Michael Keaton playing the Vulture, is able to come over, which is a backdoor way for Sony to create even stronger threads between the universe that they are building under Sony and the one that Marvel has under Disney. It's a little inside baseball with how the two studios are playing against each other and what characters they can share, but what it does is set up these, again, connectivity threads that are establishing the Sony universe with the existing MCU, which means that there are plenty of other ways that these characters can sort of interact.
How far are we allowed to go?
The big exciting news about all of this connectivity is that you probably have heard on social media the term the Sinister Six, and it feels like Sony is building up its characters on the Sony side to do a Sinister Six movie. The Sinister Six in the Spider-Man comics are a villain team-up that go after Spider-Man because they're sick and tired of losing to him individually. They finally figure they're going to take him down. Now, the earlier versions of Sinister Six used characters like Dr. Octopus and Kraven. Electro was a member of the Sinister Six, so was Sandman. These are villains that we've seen in other Spider-Man movies but don't exist in the new version of the Sony universe or even in the MCU. But we do have at least 6 villains who could make up an updated version of the Sinister Six, including the Vulture, who we've been talking about this whole time, Scorpion, who was introduced in Spider-Man Homecoming and ends up in jail with the Vulture at the end of that film. Jake Gyllenhaal, of course, plays Mysterio and could be an important part of this. Venom is now established in the Sony Cinematic Universe and could be brought over, as well as Carnage, too, if they wanted to maybe bring Venom and Carnage over into the Sinister Six. Now we're meeting Morbius. He's going to be a very important part of what is going to happen in the upcoming movies that will be told on the Sony side of it. And then there are a lot of other options of where they could go with that sixth character. It could be the villain that's introduced in Spider-Man 3, and something tells me that we might actually see Kraven happen there. The Tinkerer is someone who worked with Michael Keaton in Spider-Man Homecoming and could be a gadget guy to establish all the people who are working for the Sinister Six or could be part of this new Sinister Six. Also, we've seen 2 versions of Shocker in Spider-Man Homecoming, and he's another villain that could make up this ensemble. Sony has been trying to do a Sinister Six movie for years, and they were going to actually do it when Andrew Garfield was playing Spider-Man, and it feels like now that they're bringing Michael Keaton over from the MCU to the Sony side that they haven't given up on the idea of a Sinister Six movie. They're building a bunch of villains together on the Sony side, and that probably means, to me, that they think they're eventually going to get Tom Holland to cross back over from the Marvel side, jump into a Sony-made Sinister Six movie, and you'll have his Spider-Man going up against all those villains. Needless to say, this is a ton of speculation based on one character showing up at the very end of a trailer. But again, Sony knows what they're doing. They clearly have rights to the Vulture Michael Keaton character. Now, Morbius is still going to have to set up Jared Leto and the scientist turned vampire that he is. And listen, audiences are going to have to connect with him the way that they did with Venom. Venom was a massive hit for Sony, established Tom Hardy as that sort of anti-hero semi-villain. And if audiences buy into Jared Leto as Morbius, then the tease of the Vulture being part of that universe is going to become even more enticing. If Morbius doesn't work, this whole thing sort of grinds to a halt, and so we'll have to see what happens when it comes out later this year. What do you guys think? Do you think that we're way off, or is this speculation on point? I mean, I get really excited about these Spider-Man crossover things, and the idea of these villains sort of sharing screen time, and Venom coming over into a Morbius film, and the Vulture already being there, and maybe Tom Holland coming over. It's blowing my mind, but maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me know. Go down to the comment section, tell me if you think that Michael Keaton showing up means that the Vulture is definitely in Morbius, and let me go even one step further. Go to the comments and tell me whether you think that the Sinister Six movie is actually going to happen and Tom Holland's going to come over and fight all those villains as Spider-Man. While you're down there in that comment section, do me a favor, hit subscribe and turn on your notifications. You get the nerdiest Spider-Man videos here on the channel from me personally, so every time I do one, I want you to come and watch it with me.